Stop. Don't adjust your volume. I need you to hear the silence between my words. Because that is where the truth hides. Not in the noise, but in the empty spaces. You think you know the story of the Kola Superdeep Borehole, the Soviet project, the deepest hole mankind ever dug into the crust of the Earth. 12 kilometers of steel and hubris drilling straight down into the Baltic Shield. You've heard the urban legends, the well to hell, the story that they lowered a microphone and heard the screams of the damned. That story was a cover-up, a comfortable lie, because the reality wasn't about demons or hellfire, it was about biology. My name is Valerie. In 1989, I wasn't listening for screams. I was the lead acoustic engineer for the SG-3 station, and what we found down there didn't scream, it breathed. Let me take you back to the freeze, Murmansk Oblast, the tundra. It's a place where the sun is just a memory for half the year. The station was a concrete scar on the white landscape. We were drilling into rock that was 3 billion years old, Archean rock, before dinosaurs, before bacteria, before life. Or so we thought. It started on the 14th of October. We were at 12,262 meters. The drill bit, a diamond-studded monstrosity designed to chew through granite, stopped. It didn't break. It didn't hit a pocket of gas. It just stopped. The telemetry data was insane. It showed the rotation speed at 0, but the torque was maxed out, as if the rock had grabbed the drill bit and was holding it. I remember the smell of the control room, stale coffee, cheap tobacco, and the ozone stench of overheating servers. General Korpov was screaming at the mechanics, demanding they pull the string up. But the winch groaned. The cables sang that deadly, high-pitched song of metal about to snap. And then, the vibration started.
It wasn't an earthquake. Seismographs in Norway and Finland were flat lines. This was local. It was coming up the pipe. I put on my headset. I was supposed to monitor the acoustic feedback for stress fractures in the shaft. What I heard changed the architecture of my brain. It wasn't the grinding of rock. It was a rhythm. Thump. 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 A heartbeat. But not a human heart. It was too slow. One beat every 40 seconds. And it was loud. My God, it was loud. The frequency was 0.2 hertz. Infrasound. You couldn't just hear it. You felt it in your bone marrow. It made your teeth ache. It made your vision blur. "Valeri, what is that?" Korpov barked at me. I looked at the spectral analyzer. The screen was painting a pattern that shouldn't exist in geology. It was a waveform. A complex, repeating waveform. "It's not shifting plates, General," I said, my voice barely working. "It's hydraulic, like fluid pumping through a massive chamber." They decided to pull the drill. It took 18 hours. 18 hours of that sound getting louder, climbing the throat of the world. When the drill head finally broke the surface, the drilling floor went silent. The drill bit was gone. The tungsten carbide stem, the hardest metal we had, it wasn't snapped. It was dissolved. The end of the pipe looked like a melted candle. But it wasn't heat damage. The metal was pitted, honeycombed with millions of microscopic holes, and covered in a thick, translucent slime. The slime was steaming in the cold Arctic air. It smelled like ammonia and old copper, like blood. Dr. Arasova, our chief biologist, scraped a sample. She put it under the electron microscope right there in the lab. I watched over her shoulder. I wish I hadn't. On the screen, the gray slime wasn't just chemical residue. It was a colony, but not of bacteria. It was machines, biological machines. "They're eating the slide," Arasova whispered. Her face was the color of ash. "Valeri, look. They aren't random. They are disassembling the glass atoms and building a lattice. We were wrong about the mantle. We thought the Earth was a rock with a molten core. But looking at those impossible cells, a horrific realization bloomed in my mind. We hadn't drilled into rock. We had drilled through the shell. We had pricked the skin of something colossal. And now, the white blood cells were coming to investigate the injury. That night, the station went into lockdown. Not by Korpov's order, but because the power failed. The main generators died instantly. The backups wouldn't start. The only light came from the emergency red strobes, pulsing in time with that heartbeat from the deep. Thump. Thump. I was in the server room, trying to save the acoustic data, when the ventilation ducts began to rattle. A sound like wet leather slapping against metal. Something was coming up the borehole. 12 kilometers of vertical ascent. Nothing should be able to climb that fast. But gravity doesn't apply when you are part of the organism that generates it. I locked the door. I sat in the dark, clutching the magnetic tapes. And then I heard Arasova scream. It wasn't a scream of pain. It was a scream of recognition. "It's beautiful," she shrieked, her voice distorted, bubbling. "Let it in. It just wants to remember us." I need to tell you what happened next, but you must understand. The human mind protects itself. It blocks out what it cannot process. I have spent 30 years trying to unblock it. Because you need to know what is under your feet right now. You need to know that the ground isn't solid. It's just sleeping. I waited in that server room for 3 hours, or maybe 3 days. Time felt viscous, thick, like the air itself was resisting movement. The screaming had stopped. That was worse. Silence is the sound of an empty room. This was the silence of a full stomach. When I finally unlocked the door, the steel was warm to the touch. Not warm like a radiator, warm like a fever. The corridor outside was unrecognizable. You have to understand, SG-3 was built with Soviet brutalist architecture. Hard lines, concrete, cold metal. But now, the straight lines were gone. The corridor twisted organically, like the esophagus of some giant beast. The fluorescent lights flickered, but they weren't white anymore. They pulsed with a sickly, bioluminescent violet hue. I walked toward the main elevator. My boots didn't clang on the metal grating. They squelched. A gray carpet of that stuff covered everything. It looked like moss, but if you looked closely, it was moving. Millions of tiny, cilia-like fingers waving in unison, pushing air toward the borehole. It was a respiratory system. The station was breathing. "Help me." The voice came from the mess hall. It was soft, wet. I raised my flare gun, my only weapon, and stepped inside. The tables were overturned, but in the center of the room was General Korpov. He was sitting in a chair, but where the chair ended and the man began was impossible to say. The gray matter had fused his uniform to the plastic seat. His legs, oh God, his legs had dissolved into the floor, branching out like tree roots made of vein and bone. He was being integrated into the station's new nervous system. He looked at me. His eyes were clear, terrifyingly clear. "Valeri," he said, but his lips didn't move. The sound vibrated directly inside my skull, resonating against my eardrums from the inside out. "Don't fight it. It hurts less if you don't fight." "What is this?" I choked out. "What did we wake up?" Korpov smiled. It was a wide, unnatural smile that stretched his skin until it tore, leaking that same dark, copper-smelling fluid. "We didn't wake it up," the voice in my head replied. "We are the virus. We drilled into the host, and now the host is producing antibodies." His chest cavity opened. Not violently, it just bloomed like a flower. And inside, where his lungs should have been, there were no organs, just a complex geometric lattice of black crystal pulsing with light. He was being repurposed. His biology was being rewritten to serve the hive. I ran. I scrambled up the emergency stairwell. I had to get to the surface, to the radio tower. I had to warn Moscow, warn the world that the crust of the earth wasn't a shield, it was a quarantine zone. Every floor I passed was worse. On level 3, I saw shadows dancing on the walls, but there was no one there. The mirror effect, Arasova had called it before she died. The station was remembering us, replaying our movements. I saw a ghost of myself from yesterday, walking down the hall, coffee in hand. The entity was cataloging our history before it erased us. I burst through the heavy blast doors onto the surface. The Arctic wind hit me. I expected cold. I expected minus 40 degrees. It was hot. The snow around the borehole hadn't just melted, it was boiling. Steam rose in massive pillars twisting into the sky, and the sky, the aurora borealis was wrong. It wasn't green. It was a deep, bruised purple. And the lights weren't moving randomly. They were forming patterns, grids, symbols. I stumbled toward the comm shack. The ground beneath the snow felt spongy, unstable. As I ran, I realized the vibration, that thump, thump, was louder here. It was coming from everywhere. The mountains, the ground, the air itself. I reached the radio. I smashed the ice off the dials and tuned to the emergency military frequency. "Mayday! Mayday!" I screamed into the mic. "This is station SG3. We have a biological breach. Initiate Protocol 0. Do you copy?" Static. Just static. Then a voice cut through. It wasn't Russian. It wasn't English. It was a chaotic mix of sounds synthesized from thousands of radio waves. "Valeri," the radio hissed. "There is no outside anymore." I looked out the reinforced window, at the horizon, and then I saw it. The mountains in the distance. They were moving, not crumbling, standing up. The Ural Mountains weren't mountains. They were the spine. And the spine was stretching. We hadn't just found a pocket of life. The planet was the life. And it was waking up to scratch the itch on its surface. The radio crackled again. "The immune system is global, Valeri." My nose began to bleed. Thick, black blood. It hit the console and didn't splatter. It pooled into a perfect circle. And then the circle began to divide. I wiped the black fluid from my nose, but it didn't stop. It just flowed, like oil. I looked at my hands. The veins were no longer blue. They were shifting, moving under the skin like worms seeking the surface. I realized then that escape was a fantasy. You cannot run from the floor you stand on. You cannot hide from the air you breathe. The radio chatter died. The screaming died. The only sound left was the thump, thump, coming from the borehole. But now, my own heart was beating in perfect sync with it. I was becoming compatible. I had one choice left, not survival. Survival was off the table the moment the drill stopped. My choice was about containment. The SG-3 station was equipped with a failsafe, a tactical seismic charge. We used small explosives for sounding the rock, but there was one, the hammer. 5 tons of TNT designed to collapse the shaft in case of an uncontrollable gas blowout. I turned back into the throat of the beast. Walking back into the station was like walking into a digestive tract. The walls were pulsing. The steel floor had softened into a warm, fleshy membrane that grabbed at my boots. I saw faces in the walls, human faces, caught in the concrete like flies in amber. They weren't dead. Their eyes followed me. They were processing. I reached the control deck. The air was thick with spores. I couldn't breathe, but I didn't need to anymore. My lungs had stopped working minutes ago, yet I was fully conscious. The black blood was oxygenating my brain. I dragged myself to the console. My fingers were fusing together, turning into a claw. I had to type the code. Protocol 7 Delta. 1 9 8 9. Access denied, the computer buzzed. But it wasn't a computer voice. It was Korpov's voice. "Don't do it, Valeri. We are so close to waking up properly." "Go to hell," I whispered. But I had no mouth. My lips had sealed shut. I didn't need fingers. I smashed my hand, my claw, into the manual override panel. I tore the circuits out. Sparks flew, burning my skin, but I felt no pain, only a cold, geometric purpose. I hot-wired the detonator. The timer started. 30 seconds. I dragged myself to the edge of the borehole. The cap was gone. The hole was wide open, staring up at the ceiling like a pupil. I looked down. It wasn't dark anymore. A soft, violet light was rising from 12 kilometers down. And I saw cities. Not human cities. Massive, crystalline structures growing in the mantle. Bioluminescent cathedrals of bone and diamond. It was a civilization that had been here for billions of years. We were just the mold growing on the crust. They were beautiful. And they were hungry. Forgive us, I thought. I hope the thought carried down the shaft. We didn't know. 10 seconds. I felt the ground ripple. The Ural Mountains were settling back down. The planetary immune system sensed the threat. It knew I was about to sterilize the wound. 5 seconds. I let myself fall forward, into the hole, into the light. I didn't want to die on the surface. I wanted to be the bullet. 0. The official Soviet report dated October 1989 states that the Kola Superdeep Borehole project was halted due to unexpectedly high temperatures and funding issues. The station was abandoned. The ruins are still there today, rotting in the Arctic Circle. Tourists go there sometimes. They take pictures of the welded shut steel cap. They laugh about the well to hell legends. But here is what isn't in the report. Seismographs in Finland recorded a magnitude 4.5 event that day. The epicenter wasn't tectonic. It was a point source explosion at a depth of 2 kilometers. And there is something else. In 2023, a team of scientists lowered a hydrophone into the Arctic Ocean, 300 miles north of the Kola Peninsula. They were listening for whale songs. Instead, they found a signal. It's a rhythmic vibration, extremely low frequency. It happens once every 40 seconds. Thump, thump. It's getting faster. Global temperatures are rising. The permafrost is melting. The shield of ice and frozen soil that we have walked on for 10,000 years is thinning. We think it's just climate change. We think it's just weather. But I know the truth. The explosion didn't kill it. It just put it back to sleep. And now, as the heat rises, the fever is breaking. The ice is the only thing keeping the lock shut, and we are melting the key. Put your ear to the ground. Can you hear it? It's time to wake up.